How you doing there? Welcome everybody to another episode of Coast to Coast Cyber. If you can believe it, this is actually our 16th episode. I'm Scott Schober, your host from the East Coast, and I am joined by my brother Craig Schober over on the West Coast. How you doing there, Craig?
Great. Good to be back on the show, and I hope everyone listening enjoys this episode as much as the previous 15.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty amazing. We've done that many, and I'm starting to hear a lot of feedback throughout my day. And I interact with a lot of people, a lot of business meetings, a lot of video conferencing, and a lot of people are giving me some wonderful feedback saying, "Hey, really enjoying that show, Coast to Coast. I've been recommending it to other people." So I think it's kind of exciting. In fact, one of the technology aspects of it, we were talking about Apple and the AirTags and stuff. And one of our customers actually reached out to us asking us to do some specific modifications, perhaps to one of our instruments to hunt down AirTags, which is kind of an interesting application. So I'm sure on future shows, depending upon the outcome of it, I'll see what I can possibly share, and we could talk about that a little bit more. But maybe just to jump right in, first we want to thank our sponsors, the new sponsor that we have, and this is called Dark Kryptonite. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks by eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. If you want to learn more about Dark Kryptonite, you could certainly go to their website, www.darkkryptonite.com. Some exciting
Yeah.
stuff that they're doing there, keeping your data safe. And I had the privilege of speaking to the three owners of the company just this week, and learned a ton of exciting stuff that they're doing. So again, reach out to them, darkkryptonite.com.
Yeah, and
Um,
just to clarify,
yep.
that's kryptonite with a C, not a K. This is not the Superman kryptonite that we all know and love.
Yeah, that's a good point there. So it's dark darkcryptonite.com.
CRYPTONITE.
Yes, I'm sorry. And I can't spell either. Thank you, Craig.
Sure.
Um, let's see. Let me just give a quick rundown of our stories that we're going to dive into. First story there, hackers gaining power of subpoena via fake emergency data request. And that comes from our friend and colleague, Brian Krebs, who is just an awesome cybersecurity reporter, investigator, brings out some of the cutting edge stories and the breaches that we all love to read about. And he does the extensive dive in there with the research and really helps you appreciate a lot more than just the headlines. So we look forward to talking about that a little bit. And then the second story there is I'm done with Wyze. Wyze new hackers could remotely access your camera for 3 years and said nothing. Again, from a great publication, The Verge. They always have some exciting articles there. And we're big fans of Wyze cameras and devices there. So look forward to that. And it ties in nicely with our cyber tip of the week. When we get to our second story, we'll delve into that a little bit more. But the importance of updating and patching your apps and your OS and so on and so forth. We'll tie that in nicely as we talk about Wyze a little bit more. And then our final third story again comes from our friends at The Verge. Verizon blames bad actors for spam texts you got from your own number. What in the world are they talking about? Well, we'll find out in a little bit when we hit our third story. But maybe let's just to get into this first one here, talk a little bit about this story that Krebs took to the next level there. Hackers gaining power of subpoena via fake emergency data requests. And it starts off there talking about how criminal hackers are now they're harvesting using sensitive customer data from internet service providers, phone companies, social media firms, as well as big tech giants like Apple and Facebook. Um, what's your thoughts on this article, Craig, when you were at least going through it initially?
Well, the story kind of blew up on a lot of different sites, and it had a slightly different. I was seeing slightly different takes on it, depending
Mm-hmm.
on the author or the researcher or the journalist or whatever whoever was covering it. And I like this story because it kind of encapsulates a lot of different hacking methods into one. You got you have initially it involves an email address that was hacked or leaked or cracked or something from like legitimate email address from the department law enforcement. So
Like
maybe
a
they
police
gain
department or something. Yeah.
yeah, maybe they got their password, and so they're posing as this officer of the law. But from there, then it becomes more of a social engineering thing, because
Hmm.
now they're using this email to gain entry uh, through legitimate, like, legal ways of court warrants and things like that. So it's playing on a few different angles. And I don't know, what do you think about this? I like let me see, what is this? Apple, Facebook, Discord, and possibly, I think,
Even
even Snap.
Snapchat. Yeah.
Yeah. Though,
Yeah.
so you got some real big players involved with this. That's allegedly, I'm not sure if it's been proven yet, but allegedly they fell for the scam. I've never
Mhm.
heard of this type of hack before.
No, it's a little different. And I think just to kind of, you build on your point, the fact that it's multifaceted. And I think in the article too, it mentions that it was likely teenagers that were orchestrating it, which is kind of interesting. So a very young group that are actually the bad actors, the hackers, whatever you want to call it there.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think toward the end there, it mentions there last year's string of attacks may have been performed by the members of a cyber criminal group called Recursion Team. I have not heard about them, and I got to do a little more research on them. But
Right.
certainly a unique story, or at least a unique angle on this, I think, which is kind of cool that Krebs shares
Yeah.
his perspective on.
And it's got that urgency too. Big part of the social
Yeah.
engineering is that, hey, we've got a crime, we've got a criminal, we need evidence, whatever. And so we're going to need this we're going to have to forego the usual kind of checks and balances of the courts and get a warrant to do this search, or to do whatever, to own this website, or whatever I don't specifically know what they were asking for, but they were it involved data from ISPs and phone companies and stuff like that. So uh they're using the kind of immediacy of, we're going to need this. They're pretending to be law enforcement, but on the other side of the exchange, they're assuming they were law enforcement. So they say, well, maybe we should rush this one through because it can't wait. It's a genuine emergency. And that's how hackers always get you in the social engineering realm, because you're thinking, I gotta help this person, or I gotta help myself, or whatever, and it's got to be fast and now, and you don't think it all the way through. I'm a little surprised that companies as big as Apple and Facebook don't have who are, they normally provide tons of authorizations and data requests to departments of all kinds. I don't know why they wouldn't. I don't know how they got so easily fooled in this case, if they're doing it all the time. But I guess it happens.
Yeah, and I guess it's like you mentioned, when it's a demand for something, time is of the essence. It's a matter of life and death. That sense of urgency allows you sometimes to drop the guard, because whatever your job position is, you don't want to be the one that held up something when there is something that's really pushing. And I think it just tends to fool people. And all of us, it's a good reminder: stop, double check, do a little investigation, especially before you give out any type of private information. It's so easy to be tempted to give into that. And we've all seen it. If we've been victimized by a scam or a fraud department pretending to call, and they're going to stop your fraudulent activity on your credit card, that just need a little bit of information, and they're trying to call out little bits of pieces of information from you. So
Mm-hmm.
I think just the red flags, again, as always, they go up when somebody's trying to push something, and you get a sense they have a little agenda there. So it's a good time for you to be a little bit more careful, and make them think, and ask them questions for clarification, to get a full sense of, is this a scam? Is this a social engineer? Is this legit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of some of the really old school, like check cashing scams, and things that involve like a letterhead from a company, because that's kind of
Mhm.
all an email is, really. I mean, I'm
True.
sure I'm sure these hackers had the lingo down, so that was kind of a script almost. They had that, you just copy paste that. But when you're kind of receiving dozens or maybe hundreds of these requests a day, um, you see is the letterhead, who it's from, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, I've done this before, and the email program, whatever program you're using, whether it's Apple Mail or Outlook or Google or Gmail, it's gonna it's gonna see that spoofed address as the same in a list of 100 times that you've already gotten requests
Yeah.
from that same person in that same department from that same domain. So it all kind of starts to look the same, and so you gotta read closely, look for those little hints. Sometimes there's weird, strange misspellings or grammatical things. If the group doesn't speak English as a first language, a lot of times they trip up on that thing. Sometimes they'll include a graphic even in the kind of digital letterhead that comes through the email, and maybe that graphic will be an outdated one or off in some way. But I got to think, to fool these large companies, I think they had everything perfectly, lined up. The script was perfect, the presentation was perfect, and the timing maybe was perfect. And that's how they got through. So let's hope that this kind of alert from this story is enough to put everyone on their guard now, and it won't happen to any more organizations.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Excellent. Well, let's jump into that second story there. Before we do, just to make mention again, we want to thank our sponsor there, Dark Kryptonite. They stop ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cyber crime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. Learn more about Dark Kryptonite at darkkryptonite.com. And again, kryptonite is with a C, as Craig noted there before. So when you're typing that in, make sure you spell that right. Now, I think it's safe to say that we're not strangers to Wyze. We're kind of some of the early adopters for some of the Wyze products there. I know myself, I've gotten some of the cameras, the doorbell before it officially was released, to try to do some beta testing on it and give them feedback. And some of their stuff works great out of the box. And I've had some problems where, had to be upgraded, the firmware patches improved. But this story comes from The Verge, and it's entitled, I'm Done with Wyze. Wyze new hackers could remotely access your camera for 3 years and said nothing. Interesting. And this ties in again, as I mentioned earlier, Craig, nice with our cyber tip of the week, which we really want to emphasize to people. Stop and patch your apps, patch your OS, upgrade your firmware, any type of security patches when it's presented to you. Please do it immediately, because otherwise you could be paying for it down the road. And it's kind of the same old story with this, but it's an interesting little twist on it for just the sheer amount of time that went by. And they mention here, instead of patching, Wyze simply decided to discontinue their first version of the Wyze Cam, version 1, January, without any explanation. They didn't really give the details of it. And then they mentioned Bitdefender explains that someone could have accessed your camera's SD card from over the internet and actually swipe the encryption key. And when you do that, you could actually start watching whatever was downloaded from the video stream there, the video feed.
Mm.
And it was weird because Bitdefender actually spoke up. They talked to Wyze, reached out to them back in March 2019. Yet they didn't get a response until really the following year, later that year in November. So they mentioned a year and 8 months later, yet Bitdefender didn't even mention anything. So they kept quiet until just the other day. And then you see this story breaking here. So we're talking about a story that really started back 3 years ago. And yet, why are we hearing about it today, Craig? What's your thoughts there when we think about Wyze cameras, remote access, and this big disaster?
Well, I think there's a kind of failure on multiple levels here. For like, I came to the story from The Verge, but it was originally, like you mentioned, I mean, it was originally posted by Bitdefender. The story. It's kind of like they just came clean about this, but they came clean about it a year and a half later, after all this stuff went down, Wyze still hasn't really come clean about it. And to make matters worse, they're not fixing the problem in this version 1 of the camera. They're just discontinuing the model. And this was a big seller. I remember this camera when it
Mhm.
first came out. I heard about it 3 or 4 years ago, and this thing went for $20. Back then, we see web cameras with cloud, video cloud packages included and all these things. We see that today for, $30 or $40 maybe, and, from Wyze themselves and a couple other makers. And they have a lot of pack a lot of features in there, a lot of value, but they're newer versions. These things were kind of an anomaly for when they came out, because I remember I mentioned it actually to our father, and he's like, wow, $20 and I can get a camera and I can network it, and we could put several cameras in the house. What a great deal. So I bought about 5 or 6, I think, for him. He put them all over the house. He still got some of them, but since then he's replaced with the newer versions, as they, some now include infrared and better better audio, improved opticals, and all those things. So he's kind of upgrading as Wyze has upgraded. But I know, because it was such a kind of an interesting, effective value, a great value of a product when it came out. They've sold thousands of these things, like probably hundreds of thousands easily. So now you got all these vulnerable cameras spread out all across the world, a lot, mostly in the USA. And they're just going to kind of leave their customers, their initial customers, the most loyal ones. They're kind of leaving them in the lurch with these insecure cameras. So it's really not cool, and it's not a good look. And I think it's going to come back to bite Wyze on their future offerings, because people are going to remember this. And on top of all that, they're a Chinese company. Wyze is kind of the American facing brand, and they sell a lot of amazing products, a lot of really great values. They got robot vacuums, RC cars, like all these crazy
Everything and anything.
Yeah, they got a lot of gadgets, and so they have a really kind of strong brand going. But as we see, a problem with a lot of these companies, especially when they do things on the cheap, and this was a cheap product, is when they suffer with things like customer support. That doesn't hurt them immediately, but it's kind of a slow burn, and it takes a year or two, and through word of mouth, and these customers start to move on to alternative competing products, because if they don't have good customer service, like the reports I'm seeing that were kind of part of this story, not reaching out to customers and explaining that there's a problem and that it needs to be patched. And that, just look at this. They were accessing, what is it? It was the camera's SD card, right, from over the internet. That was where the problem was. So maybe if you can't patch all these cameras easily, you could say, why don't you just remove your SD card from the camera? That would solve that problem right there. It's a stopgap measure, but it would keep people's data safe.
Sure,
So you'd think, if they could communicate these things to their users, I think it would go a long way. But I think their customer support is definitely lacking.
Yeah, and I think they do suffer from like exploding overnight, like a phenomenon, almost going viral, because you can now, it's not like you have to buy direct from Wyze. You probably get the best price from them per se, but you can go on Amazon. You could walk into Home Depot and they have select Wyze products even. So what does it tell you? To some degree, they've become such a strong consumer play that they lost connection with the consumer, because they don't know who the customer is. They're not selling to the customer. They're selling through the big box, the Home Depots and others now. It makes it hard. So that just means they got to polish that much better, especially the customer support side. And I know just myself, even going on when I got the doorbell, I got an early release of that and was trying. I bought 2 of them actually, and one of them worked and the other one didn't. And so and spent a couple hours fiddling with one of them only to find out there was something wrong. And they had a recall and they had new firmware and some updates to the hardware, but you had to send it back. It was kind of a disaster. For me, the negative side was when I was going to buy another thermostat. I like Nest. I use that. It works really good. I was going to say, well, maybe I'll give a try to a Wyze thermostat. And I was a little hesitant. And I was like, well, I had some challenges with the doorbell. If I'm too early to buy it, they don't get the kinks out. I'm going to have to pay for it. Do I want a thermostat and now have my heat, going up to 95 and use up all my fuel or something else? So I was a little hesitant there. And I think other people may be similar. If I'm an average consumer, if you get burned once, you're a little more cautious before you run out and buy more technology. So, although cameras, I guess, a little different. Maybe it's most of the time you're not looking at the feed for the cameras. I don't think, if you get a detection alert or something like that. I actually have one of the Wyze cams set up on I'm a mouse number 10 in my basement up in our summer house. And it's got basically a Wyze cam set up to it. So I can know in an instant, oh, we caught another mouse, and make sure we get up there soon to dispose of it. So we titled it Mouse Cam, which, it's fun. It's not that practical per se, but it serves its need temporarily for something. Whereas something like, if your HVAC in your home, it's being controlled by that and it has a bad hiccup, that can be very costly. If you had that thing running nonstop and then you have a failure, to replace it might be 5 or 10 grand, or just the amount of fuel that you burn or electricity. So you think a little bit differently, I think, until you trust in the brand enough to shift over to it.
Yeah. And, whether it's true or not, we're being fed so much kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about our privacy being violated and spying, and now throwing, China into the mix, a Chinese company. And consumers are going to start to, wise up, no pun intended.
How do you spell wise for that?
Yeah. And they're going to say, hey, wait a minute, this looked like an American company, but it's actually a Chinese company. And come to think of it, I couldn't get through to their customer service last time. And I don't trust these companies. I don't trust anyone. Anytime I can't talk to a tech support person directly on the phone, on the other end. So I'm going to look elsewhere. And there's, these companies that make, security cameras like this, they're a dime a dozen these days.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's a lot of options out there.
Oh yeah, there is. And I think the more I think about it, and I've recommended Wyze to so many people, but at the same time, to your point about, like, you think, well, it's made in China, and you get about 2 weeks, I think, of video recording in the cloud that you don't have to pay for, which is really attractive. And I think part of Wyze success is the fact that they really provide a lot of value for the price. So you can get a camera and try it and play with it. And if you drop 30-40 bucks and it doesn't work out, you just throw it in the closet. If you go with a Google or some of these other more well-known brands and you drop $180 and you have a commitment for a yearly subscription service, month to month, you're paying out $10 for this much data storage or this or that. It's a different business model there. So you really got to invest in the technology and the name and the brand, but you got to pay for it. Whereas Wyze, $20-$30 is not that much money to try a concept or an idea to see if it fits for you. And I think what you have is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people all trying out this $30 camera. And if it doesn't work, they throw it on the side and they try the next model and the next model, because nobody has the patience to try to return it. So it could build good customer relationship, and it could also, like you said, backfire and eventually create a bunch of frustrated consumers that almost become your enemy and start buying the competitor stuff. So they got to really improve, I think, customer service and just not cancel a product and not support it anymore when there's any type of known vulnerabilities that have been discovered.
Yeah. And I could attest to their marketing aggressiveness for their cloud services. I get those emails constantly, because I personally registered a few of those cameras for myself and for Dad. But so I get the emails, I get the marketing messages. Hey, you've only got 3 days left to to take up our offer to activate your cloud account. Hey, you've only got 2 days left to take up our offer. You've only got 1 day. So it's funny how they're putting all their resources towards their cloud, because that's a big money maker. It's a big revenue maker for them. And they're not putting as many resources toward the local storage, the SD card, because that's the thing that got cracked. So it tells you something, that they know where their bread is buttered. And so as the consumer, you got to be wary about companies that only care about revenue from services, for instance, because then that means they're gonna be skimping on something else, and usually that means they're skimping on some local hardware or software security measure, and that's where this hack came into play. So
I do agree with that, and I do got to give them kudos for their overall concept and design and implementation. I thought they did a job that it was done well.
It's a great product.
Good products, and they mimic the likes of when you open the packaging. It gives you an Apple-like feel, perhaps not as polished or as clean. When you get into the actual configuration and setup, I think they start to suffer a little bit more as you start to say, well, it doesn't show that on my screen, and oh wait, I got to upgrade the firmware. I didn't even turn the thing on yet, and it's already telling me this or that. So you can get a little frustrated, but that's all consumer technology. I think they're constantly upgrading and fixing it. So you just have to stay on top of it if you want to keep secure. And again, just as a friendly reminder, that ties in with our cyber tip of the week. If you have a Wyze cam, if you have a Nest, if you have any type of camera, HVAC, Internet of Things type of device connected in your home, just make sure you try to update and patch every time you see that it's available, because the more you patch your apps, your IoT devices, your operating systems, the better chance you're going to have staying safe from being a victim of a cyber criminal. That's all.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, let's jump into our last story here. But just as again, a friendly reminder, thank you to our sponsor for our 16th episode of Coast to Coast Cyber. That is Dark Kryptonite. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. Learn more at www.darkkryptonite.com, and kryptonite with a C. All right. Well, our final story here, Craig, is again taken from The Verge. Verizon blames bad actors for the spam text you got on your own number. I don't know about you, but between robocalls and spam and everything else that's going on, some days do you look at your phone and you don't even want to touch it?
Oh, I think it happens once a day, every day with me. I don't. I probably get. What do you get? Let's compare numbers. I probably get at least a half a dozen bogus calls. I would say they're robocalls. I don't think it's a live person ever, even though the voicemail, it sounds like a real voice. It's a recording though, and they're just looking for me to go down some touch choose a number to go down some stupid menu tree, so that they can then collect info eventually down the line if they did connect me to a real person. But I'd say about a half a dozen of the calls. The text, not so much. I know Kelly, my wife, she gets a lot of those bogus texts regularly. Somehow she got on a text chain. She doesn't know how, and she just gets them a couple a day, every day. And they're almost impossible to block because it comes from a different number every day. So you block the number, but it doesn't matter because the next one you're going to get a few hours later, it's just going to be a completely different number. So it's exasperating, to say the least. I don't know. What about you? How many do you get a day?
I just grabbed a random day here, and I see that I have 10 calls from my mobile. It's just phone calls only. And out of that, 4 of them were actual calls that involved me talking to another party or answering. So that means I got 6 robocalls. I've, written to the carriers, gone on the do not call list. I've tried apps, nothing really seems to work. We've talked a lot, even in the past, and I've done a lot of interviews on all the robocalls, and and all the updates and how the FCC is getting involved and trying to make a difference in the carriers and you know the different technology implementations. But unfortunately, after all is said and done, the problem still remains, and that's the part that bothers me the most, maybe.
Hmm. Yeah, and full disclosure, we're kind of an AT&T family,
Yes.
so we don't have Verizon. We used to have a couple of people in our individuals in our family were Verizon, but
Yeah.
since we switched, so we can't attest to personal anecdotal knowledge of this story, because this really is just a Verizon story. But I think it's pretty safe to say that all the carriers are pretty bad at this.
Hmm.
They're not very proactive, because again, kind of like the last story, I think they're looking first to say, before fixing the problem or before even preventing it from ever happening, they say, how can we generate revenue from this
Yeah.
problem? And they say, well, I got it. Let's put out an app that blocks robocalls and we'll charge $2.99 for it. Or
Hmm.
let's make it a reoccurring subscription bundle service, so people pay $3 a month every month for the rest of their, you know, life with this carrier. And so they're doing is thinking about trying to fix the problem after the fact. And even their
Hmm.
fixes are pretty weak, in my opinion. I don't think nothing
Yeah.
is 100%, you know?
Yeah. And that's also after they've exercised every other scheme to monetize people. So I mean, and again, like you said, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, doesn't matter who you have, they're all unfortunately fall under that carrier, play the games. They are making money when robocalls are called. So every
Hmm.
time that these calls are going out, and there's millions at a time sometimes going out, and people are picking up, answering, frustrated, hanging up, somebody's paying the carrier for that. So why would you want to stop a revenue stream, when that many calls are happening, and most of them are short calls and get hung up quickly. So that's money in the bank in a sense.
Hmm.
It's really sad the way that all works there. And then trying to sell apps and sell types of things that can actually monitor and prevent it, they trying to monetize on it again. And the irony of it is one report I was doing research on once on robocalls and this and that, and then I found out, which really infuriated me, that these guys that are doing these robocalls, sending out millions of calls at a time, and mostly are done outside the U.S. to lie off the radar and can't get caught by law enforcement for what they're doing, can't get fined, and the amount of fines are almost nil that they've ever been caught and actually fined. But they are actually getting paid by the carriers to provide them with statistical reports
Hmm.
on people, whether they pick the phone up and answer, and how long the actual call was. There's actual value to that, and it's fractions of pennies. But when you're launching millions of calls every second and going from overseas into the United States, for example, it could actually start turning into a revenue stream. So you're
Hmm.
doing things that you push the line and are illegal, and you're getting compensated by the very ones enabling it or allowing it, the carriers. It's a big mess, and it's got to be stopped. But let's dive into the story here. Verizon blames bad actors for the spam text you got from your own number. And it mentions here the carrier says it's working with U.S. law enforcement to hunt down and find those that are responsible. And it mentioned here also one version of the fake text that actually read, "Free message, your bill is paid for March. Thanks. Here's a little gift for you." I personally can attest. I've gotten this, again, being an AT&T customer. I've probably got about 10 of these with very similar types of message. And honestly, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, maybe they're going to send me something, whatever, free 3 months of Apple TV, or have some deal with Dish. Their
Hmm.
partner with, who knows? You don't know what it is, but your mind starts to think, free for me. Oh, that's so nice. But fortunately, I didn't click on it, and it was a scam. I think I actually called you on the first time. I got, did you see this? What is this?
Yeah.
Again, because I don't.
AT&T. Yeah.
Yeah, AT&T, and I'm not paying the bill, but I'm alerted to it, so it kind of scared me. Seems legit.
Yeah. Quick. When I went to the comment section on this story, I like to scroll down and see what people, giving their anecdotal takes on it. Oh, this happened to me. This didn't happen to me. You're crazy. You're an idiot. Get into it a little bit. And I noticed one person said, um, you know, one part of the problem is with these is that at least on the iPhone and the iOS platform, you can't even block texts that originate from emails. Now, I thought that was kind of strange,
Oh.
and I was like, well, I know we can block. It's easy to block text originating from numbers, but I looked and said, you know what? They do have a point. However, I did find a way you can block it. You go. You have to literally create a new contact. So you pretend that an anonymous Gmail that you got, which with some sketchy text message, and you know it's bogus. So you create a contact for like it's a real person, and then you just block that contact. That's how you do it. But Apple really should make it easy to block an email as they make it easy to block a phone number.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll update that. But that's just a quick little tip for anyone who might have the same issue. But getting back to the story, we see that this is tying in again to Russian hacking and Russia phobia and the war with Ukraine and all those things. Because in the Verge story, this reporter Chris Welch he claimed that the link was forwarded from Russian state TV network called Channel One Russia. So Verizon, he and this journalist has direct access to Verizon, and they claim there's no indication that fraudulent activity is originating in Russia. So we kind of got a little bit of he said, she said going back and forth. So I think we're going to get more clarity on this story in the coming days or weeks, because right now we just kind of getting you mentioned the usual kind of, it was like the usual rubber stamping that Verizon said, oh, we're not aware of any bad actors, but we work with U.S. law enforcement to try and identify the sources, blah blah blah. So kind of a standard pat
cookie
response.
cutter.
Yeah, so I hope something comes of this. Hopefully what Verizon said is true, but I sincerely doubt it, because we all have these stories, whether it's from AT&T, T-Mobile, or Verizon. We've all got these scam stories that we can attest to.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and I guess we shouldn't pick on Verizon. They're one of the biggest, maybe, so it seems to be more prevalent or more headline, and they're often referred to as one of the best in the United States, at least, as one of the best wireless providers, I think, because they do a good job and have good coverage and so on and so forth. Maybe at a little bit of a premium, but typically you pay for what you get. That being said, I mean, I was a Verizon customer for many years. AT&T I have now, and I do like it, especially if you're traveling international. I find that it works out really well and think it's pretty reliable. So I'm happy with that. But it was certainly kind of an interesting story here, and I guess all the carriers just need to really take it to heart and do more to actually prevent all these problems with robocalls and spammers and cyber criminals that are doing all kinds of unscrupulous things, fooling people out of their hard-earned money. And until they come on the side of the consumer, it's going to be really hard to trust them. And I think it's going to be an ongoing battle.
Yeah, and before we wrap the story and the show, just want to mention quickly that Verizon does say to report, you can forward suspicious text to the number 7726. So if you got any text that you cannot verify its authenticity, it's kind of strangely worded, whatever, anything suspicious at all, you forward that text to 7726 and let Verizon deal with it, because they can instantly determine if it's spoofed or fraudulent or legitimate, and they'll get back to you on that, or maybe they'll investigate further, and who knows, maybe you could be the one that breaks the next story about a big kind of text scam that's gonna just about to sweep the country.
Yeah, and I think there is some validity to saying when you do report things, and nobody likes to take the time out of their day and provide more information, so on and so forth. But when enough people speak out, it gets people's attention. I know in our company, if we have customers that might be frustrated or want a firmware update or a patch or an improvement, if enough people start saying it, we take notice. and we try to do what we can to keep our customers happy. So, if you have a problem out there with one of your carriers and you're dealing with stuff like this, pick up the phone, send them a text, send them an email, send them smoke signals, whatever it takes to let them know how you feel, and hopefully they'll do good, and then they'll respond to your complaint, criticism, praise, whatever it is. Then they need feedback, basically. Great.
That's right.
Well, so three great stories today, and a nice cyber tip there, just as the reminder to make sure maybe this is your weekend to update and patch all your apps, your operating system, your IoT devices. Make sure you take care of that so you stay on top of it and you can stay safe. As a reminder to our valued listeners, Dark Kryptonite is our sponsor for this episode number 16, and we thank Dark Kryptonite. They stop ransomware, malware, phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. You can learn more if you visit their website, www.darkkryptonite, and kryptonite with a C.com. So check it out. They've got some interesting stuff up there. Talks all about the inner workings of some of the latest tech and developments that they've worked on there, and you'll get a better understanding of it. So reach out to darkkryptonite.com. And also, just as a more housekeeping, just to, first of all, thank everybody for listening in each week to our episode of Coast to Coast Cyber. We're getting a lot of great feedback, and we really appreciate that. Thank you all. And just to mention, this podcast, it is available on YouTube, Spotify, Google, iHeart, Apple, Amazon, and many more. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and review our podcast. We want to hear from you. For questions and comments, feel free to DM us on Twitter. You can do that directly to myself at ScottBVS, or even visit scottschober.com for more information. And you could certainly give feedback through there, through the automated form. If we read your comment or question on the podcast, we will send you a choice of a signed copy of Hacked Again, Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business, or Senior Cyber. Thanks for listening. And again, tune in next week for another new episode packed with cyber news, tips, and stay safe. This is Scott Schober signing out from the East Coast here of Coast to Coast Cyber.
Hey, and this is Craig signing out from the West Coast. And everyone, stay safe.
Yep, stay safe.
With your hosts, Scott and Craig Schober.